Hello boys and girls, here we are again on your pedagogical space. So let's start with session 6. And we'll be talking about comparatives of quantifiers and superlatives. So here is the plan of our session. So we'll first talk about comparatives of quantifiers, and then we'll talk about superlatives. That is one element compared to all the others in the same group. That is, you compare, for example, one person to all the other persons in his family, for example, in terms of age or height or whatever. So A, superiority, with short adjectives first, which is on this pattern, the plus adjectives plus est. B, long adjectives, which is the most plus adjective. And C, there are some exceptions again, with adjectives such as good, bad, far. And finally, we'll talk about superlatives of inferiority, which is all adjectives. It concerns all adjectives. There is no difference between short or long adjectives here, which is on this pattern, the least plus the adjectives, whether short or long. So let's start talking about comparatives of quantifiers. You know, when you want to compare, you can use adjectives, and we can also use quantifiers. So let's start with quantifiers of equality. Examples. We have two examples here. There are as many subjects in secondary education as in intermediate education. B, she spends as much money on transportation as on school supplies. Now, you see that many and much are the quantifiers we are talking about. The difference is that many goes with countable nouns, subjects, and much goes with uncountable nouns, which is money. So, inferiority, we have two examples here. There are fewer smokers in public places than before. That is, there are less smokers, fewer people who smoke in public places these days, because of the police, of rules and so on. B, during weekdays, I spend less time at home than at school. Again, you remark here, fewer is used for countable nouns, smokers, and less is used for uncountable nouns such as time. Now, comparatives of quantifiers, superiority now. Again, we have examples, two examples. A, scientific stream students have more subjects than literary stream students. And B, there is more water than land on earth. So, you all know that scientific stream students have more subjects than literary stream students. And we see this during the examination of the back at the end of the year. Scientific students have 5 days in comparison with literary students who have 3 days. So, more subjects than. So scientific stream students have more subjects than literary students, and we can also use the same quantifier for uncountable nouns. There is more water than land on earth. You all know that, huh? Comparatives of quantifiers. Here is a recapitulation here. So equality, inferiority, and superiority. We have divided the table into countable and uncountable. So we can use all these quantifiers with countable nouns. For example, and for equality, as many inhabitants as many smokers as many children as, which is not the same when we come to uncountable nouns. We cannot use many, but we use much. And we will say as much water as much money as much importance as, and so on. Now, we talk about inferiority. Fewer than, and less than, which is used for uncountable nouns. So we use fewer for countable, fewer pupils, fewer inhabitants, but less money than, less importance than, less time than. Superiority now, there is no difference for superiority. We can use more than for the two. So we will say more inhabitants than. For instance, there are more inhabitants in Algeria than in Tunisia, for example, and more money than. If you're talking about the sum of money you have and the one that your friend has, you can say, for example, I have more money than my friend. For example, now here are some examples of countable and uncountable nouns. We have a list of countable nouns here and a list of uncountable nouns. Pens, tables, cars, chairs, stars, bags, inhabitants, all these are words that we can count, which is not the same for these words here, which are uncountable. Of course, we can't count money. We can count liters of water, but not one water, two waters, or one money, two monies. You can say $1 or $1, $2, and so on. But you're not going to say one money, two monies, three monies. The same for hair and sand, love, happiness, joy, courage, sadness, intelligence, powder, sugar, butter, salt, flour, importance, help, time. All these words are uncountable nouns. Let's move now to some practice. Fill in the following sentences with the appropriate comparative. We have a table of the comparatives here. As many as much as, fewer, less than, more than, fewer than here. Sentence A. I can't buy that car because I have money necessary. What quantifier is appropriate for this sentence? Mind the meaning, I can't buy that car. Why? There is a reason. because I have less money than necessary. That means that I don't have enough money. Following example. Again, the list of quantifiers is here. Sentence B. Parents should spend time they can with their children. So how much time should parents spend with their children? As much time as they can with their children. Huh? Because you know, if parents don't talk with their children, that creates some problems in the family. Yeah? So this is why parents should spend as much time as they can with their children. Following sentence. Baccalaureate candidates should read their questions once. How many times do you think you should read your questions when you're at an exam? More than once. That is more than one time. Baccalaureate candidates should read their questions more than once. Another sentence. There are inhabitants in the countryside, in big cities nowadays. We're talking about the number of inhabitants in the countryside and in big cities. What can we say about this number? There are fewer inhabitants in the countryside than in big cities. The number of inhabitants is smaller in the countryside. Now let's go to another point, which is superlatives. We start by talking about superlatives of superiority. Again, there is a difference between short adjectives and long adjectives, and there are some exceptions still. So let's start with short adjectives here. We have an example. I am the youngest pupil in my class. Now, of course, when we say this, it's because we have information in mind. Now, here is the number of the pupils in my class. There are 35 pupils in my class. 30 pupils are 19-year-old. 4 pupils are 18-year-old. And 1 pupil is 17 years old. Who is this 1 pupil here? Of course, it's the one who is declared in the sentence. It's me. I am the youngest pupil in my class. Now, this element here is compared to all the members of his class. So, there we have one more example. Mesopotamia civilization is considered the oldest in the world's history. You have seen this in your first unit about civilizations. Let's carry on with the rule. As we said, we are comparing an element with the other of each group or category. Element A, verb, superlative, that is the plus short adjective plus est, in its group or in its category. We have an example. Algeria is the largest country in Africa. You see, let's go to some other information about long adjectives. We will have a practice afterwards. So B, long adjectives. An example. China is the most populated country in the world. Again, before we say this, we should rely on some information, on some true information. China, we all know that there are 1 billion and more than 400 million inhabitants in China. As for India, there are 1 billion and more than 360 million inhabitants. As for the United States, which is the third country in terms of number of inhabitants, it comes with 329 million inhabitants. That is more. There are still 624,709 inhabitants. An example. So before we move to the example, we exemplify or we demonstrate our example with these numbers. So if someone tells you, why do you say that China is the most populated country in the world? We have information, we have statistics here. So we rely on true information. An example, the most successful educational system in the world is the Finnish. Finnish is the adjective of nationality of Finland. So the example says, the most successful educational system in the world is the Finnish. Let's move to the rule now. Element A, verb, superlative, which is the most, plus long adjective. Remember, we're talking about long adjectives here. Now, in each group or category. An example, mathematics is the most difficult subject for many students. You know, a lot of students complain about mathematics. They all say that mathematics is difficult and so. So, mathematics is the most difficult subject for many students. Let's move to some irregular adjectives. We have adjectives here and their superlatives. Good, the best. Bad, the worst. Far, the farthest or the furthest. The two are correct. We have examples here. Winter is the worst season for fishermen. A second example, Neptune is the farthest planet away from Earth. Now, superlatives of inferiority. The rule for this type of superlatives is the least plus all adjectives. We're not going to make a difference between short or long adjectives here. So we simply say the least plus all other adjectives. Examples here. We should think of inventing the least polluting modes of transport. Second, the least expensive products are generally the least safe. So You remark here we have a long adjective and least. A short adjective here and the same superlative least. So, the least expensive products are generally the least safe. Let's move to some practice now. Filling the following sentences with superlatives made from the following adjectives. So we have adjectives good, large, and successful. We need these adjectives to form superlatives for each of these sentences. We have 3 sentences here. Algeria is country in Africa. B, educational system in the world is the Finnish. And C, Pelé is considered as footballer by many specialists. What are you going to say for sentence A, for example? Are we going to use good, large, or successful? Of course, we are talking in terms of dimension here. Algeria is the largest country in Africa. This is, of course, true, because in the past it was Sudan, but now it is parted into 2 sides, North and South Sudan. So Algeria is now the biggest, the largest country in Africa. Sentence B, educational system in the world is the Finnish. Is it good, successful, or large? What are we talking about here? Of course, we are talking about success. The most successful educational system in the world is the Finnish. As for the last sentence, who doesn't know Pelé to be the best footballer in the world? Of course, we all know that Pelé is considered as the best footballer by many specialists. Now we've come to the end of our session, so I tell you goodbye. See you next time.
شكرا على المشاهدة. لا تنسوا الاشتراك في القناة، الضغط على الجرس، الإعجاب بالفيديو.